Hi, what are your names?
My name is Mary Rose. I'm Cheryl from the Philippines.
I'm Janet.
I'm Zara, nice to meet you. So today we're doing a podcast. Our episode we're doing is domestic helper work rights. Does living in your employer's home affect your privacy or any free time?
Yeah.
How?
Our employer, my employer is because the other employer not allow the other helpers. For example, every day you cannot allow to going out. But for me, my employer have a good attitude to treat the helpers.
Magsalita ka dyan, te.
They treat me as family. So that's why they say that we are human. Even if you are helper, we will treat you like our family, treat you like a woman, respect your privacy. So that's why I'm so very proud that I have. Because some other not good as like me. The other is no food like this and everything.
Yeah, that's true.
If I wanna have to change here in Hong Kong, maybe because before there is in a contract that every helpers have a room, but the others don't have a room to rest. So maybe I hope someday that's the rules that I need to that. For example, the employer, if you want to get a helper, you need to provide the room for them to privacy, to rest, because they work hard.
Yeah.
So for me,
That's true. I think like every helper should get their own space.
And food also.
Yeah, especially that.
Like
They should be treated properly. They should get their own privacy and space.
yes, because that's important for me. Even if the work is hard, it's okay. You can rest. If your employer treated you well, it's okay. For me, no work is very hard. So of course, if you work, it's hard too. So the important is for me, the salary is good here. But if you are not happy in your work because you did not treat it well, that's not good. For me, that's important for me. Even if the work is hard and my employer treated me, I can long here as long as they want me.
Okay, thank you so much. Even though domestic helpers are covered by Hong Kong's employment ordinance and a special standard employment contract, foreign domestic helpers are still treated very differently from most other workers. They face restrictive migration rules, weaker wage protection, and a constant fear of losing their job and being forced to leave Hong Kong. Today, we want to use real statistics and stories to show how these structures affect domestic helpers' everyday lives. We will look at their legal status, their pay and working hours, and the forms of abuse and discrimination they face.
Let's start with who we're talking about. As we said in our last video, at the end of 2022, there are about 338,000 migrant domestic workers in Hong Kong, and more recent figures place the number closer to 368,000. Almost all are women from Southeast Asia, especially the Philippines and Indonesia, and they all come on temporary contract-based employment visas.
These visas are highly restricted. Migrant domestic workers are legally barred from ever qualifying for permanent residency in Hong Kong. No matter how many years they work here, that means someone can spend decades raising Hong Kong children and caring for Hong Kong elders and still never be allowed to settle here as a permanent resident. On paper, they are entitled to things like rest days, holidays, and accommodation. In reality, power imbalances and immigration rules make it extremely hard for them to claim those rights without risking their job and the right to stay.
Two of the most controversial policies are known as the 2-week rule and the live-in rule. We've briefly talked about this in our first video, but we'll talk about it again. Both have been criticized by the United Nations and human rights groups as drivers of exploitation.
The 2-week rule means that if a domestic helper's contract is terminated, they generally only have 2 weeks to find a new employer or leave Hong Kong. If they walk away from an abusive employer, they risk deportation and losing their income, which creates huge pressure to endure abuse rather than complain. Then there is the live-in rule, which legally requires domestic helpers to live inside their employer's home. This often translates into extremely long working hours, no real separation between work and rest, and cramped or inappropriate sleeping arrangements, sometimes even on the floor or in shared spaces. A United Nations report in 2023 specifically urged Hong Kong to reform both the 2-week rule and live-in rules, and to extend the standard minimum wage protections to domestic workers. Rights groups argue that without such reforms, domestic helpers remain structurally vulnerable to forced labor and trafficking.
Now let's talk about wages. Domestic helpers are covered by a specific minimum allowable wage, sometimes called the MAW. As a contract signed on or after 30th of September 2025, that minimum is 5,100 HKD per month.
That may sound like a lot at first glance, but this monthly rate is significantly lower than what local workers would earn under the city's general minimum wage, especially once you consider that many helpers work extremely long hours. Some government sources point out that employers must also provide free food or a food allowance, accommodation, and medical care. However, research and media reports tell a more troubling story. A survey of more than 1,000 domestic helpers found that they worked an average of 71.4 hours per week, far above standard full-time hours. During the COVID-19 lockdown in 2020, about 40,000 domestic helpers reportedly did not receive a single day off.
There is also evidence of systematic underpayment. Some workers have been found earning as little as $1,500 per month, far below the legal minimum, sometimes while being forced to take on a second job for the employer's business. Many also face illegal deductions to repay high recruitment agency fees, trapping them in debt bondage.
Multiple studies show that exploitation of domestic workers in Hong Kong is widespread. Justice Center Hong Kong's research suggests that more than 80% of the territory's roughly 336,000 domestic helpers are exploited, with some working up to 20 hours a day. The same research estimated that about 1 in 6 migrant domestic workers in Hong Kong is a victim of forced labor, and a significant portion have been trafficked. In another survey by Hong Kong Human Rights Monitor, over 25% of domestic helpers reported contract violations such as being made to work on rest days or public holidays, being paid below the minimum wage, being denied proper accommodation, or having their passports taken away.
Abuse is not just economic. One report found that 18% of domestic workers had experienced physical abuse and 66% had suffered some sort of exploitation, with about 1 in 6 trapped in forced labor conditions. During the strict lockdown in 2020, reports of sexual abuse and harassment against domestic workers also reportedly tripled.
Illness can make workers even more vulnerable. Between 2020 and early 2025, rights groups recorded 195 cases of migrant domestic workers in Hong Kong who were diagnosed with cancer or other serious illness. Around 30% of them were illegally fired because of their health, while many of those who kept their jobs reported unpaid wages, being forced to use rest days for medical appointments, or paying their own medical costs. In addition, for workers living in their employer's home and relying on them for immigration status, speaking out about such abuse is incredibly risky. As a result, many incidents go unreported, and only about 20% of such cases reach bodies like the Labor Department or Equal Opportunities Commission, with an even smaller fraction actually succeeding in claims.
Another key part of the picture is employment agencies, which many workers depend on to get a job in Hong Kong. Investigations by NGOs show that some agencies charge excessive recruitment fees, creating heavy debts that domestic workers must repay from their wages.
These debts increase the pressure to accept poor working conditions. If a worker is already deep in debt to an agency, quitting an abusive employer may mean being unable to repay the loan and facing serious financial consequences back home. Because of these factors, researchers describe many workers as being in situations amounting to debt bondage, which is recognized internationally as a form of modern slavery. Combined with the 2-week rule, limited legal aid, and the live-in requirement, these agency practices help create what one academic report called a context of heightened vulnerability to exploitation and right violations. In other words, the problem is not just bad employers, but a system that builds in dependence and fear.
Despite all these challenges, domestic workers in Hong Kong are not just victims. They are organizers, union members, and advocates for their own rights. During the past decade, they have formed unions, taken test cases to court, and marched in the streets to demand reforms.
One example is a case where 2 sisters from Indonesia took their employer to a labor tribunal after being forced to work in his beauty salon for an illegally low wage of Hong Kong 1,500 a month. The tribunal ruled in their favor, and their story has become a symbol of how legal action, though difficult, can deliver some justice. International pressure has also grown. In 2023, a United Nations report urged Hong Kong to reform the 2-week rule and live-in rules and to apply the general minimum wage to migrant domestic workers. Advocacy by domestic worker unions and the international federations has helped secure incremental gains, including updated minimal allowable wage levels and stronger recognition of domestic workers' contributions. Still, many campaigners argue that as long as domestic helpers are denied a path to permanent residency and remain tied to a single employer for their immigration status, real equality will remain out of reach. They call for deeper reform so that the people caring for Hong Kong's families can also enjoy secure rights, fair pay, and protection from abuse.
To sum it all up, domestic helpers in Hong Kong are essential workers who keep the city running, but the statistics tell us that they face high levels of exploitation, underpayment, and even forced labor. Their struggle for work rights is not just about salary, it's about immigration policy, living conditions, health, and fundamental human dignity. As students and residents of Hong Kong, we benefit from their labor every day. Understanding the data behind their experiences is a first step toward pushing for fair policies and respecting them as workers, neighbors, and equal human beings. The question we should be asking ourselves is simple. If we truly believe in fairness and human rights, what changes are we willing to support so that domestic helpers in Hong Kong no longer have to struggle just to claim basic work rights? That's the end of our section of the commentary.
So today we're gonna be talking to you about the interviews that we've gotten from some of the domestic helpers that we have interviewed the past weekend, and we would like to get your thoughts on it.
Okay, to start, right, I've watched your previous episodes, but perhaps explain your CP to me as if I hadn't watched any of those.
Okay. So our CP project is basically about producing a couple of podcast episodes where it's basically consists of us talking to helpers and interviewing them and then bringing them to people of our community and having them react to it and seeing what they learn. And then there's an excerpt of us talking about the statistics and the research that we've done that educates us on the topic.
Okay.
So basically what we're trying to do is spread awareness and advocate for the struggles that domestic helpers face in Hong Kong.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so this is an excerpt of something that we've gotten from work rights, because so far this is our more one of our more serious topics because it's about their rights and about the law. Mm-hmm. So we have record the interview in text formats in order to protect these helpers in case they didn't feel comfortable having this aired out on a public platform. So according to a helper, she says that she sometimes feels like a ghost in the house that she cleans every day, because she says that sometimes some helpers, they aren't given a key to the houses that they're taking care of because either the employer just doesn't trust them. So this often leads to things where they have to have someone from that family be in the house in order to get in the house, or if the host family, or if the employer, if they're going on vacation, they're often trapped in the house and they have to rely on free cooked or canned food. And they also talked about how their rest day is simply 24 hours and how the law requires a rest day. But for a lot of the time, Sunday starts with them washing the dishes, walking the dog, or cleaning the kitchen before they are allowed to leave. And then they have to be back by a certain time because they have to start working or caring for children if they are. And also about privacy and space, they talked about how sometimes they're required to sleep in very small corners or in a shared space with a grown child in it or in the living room. And they, according to a helper that we've interviewed, she says, we don't ask for a palace, but we need to feel safe, and how it can be very comfortable for us with no privacy in that kind of lifestyle. So a lot this, although some employers may find loopholes in this in order to still be within the law, a lot of times these helpers, they still feel their human rights are infringed on. So do you have any thoughts on that matter, what you've learned from this?
I think it's such an interesting topic to come across. If you've ever spoken to any helpers that maybe have worked as a foreign domestic helper here in Hong Kong, and then also have worked as a foreign domestic helper in Singapore or other places, the laws are very different even in those places. So in Singapore, I know that I think they are only a compulsory 1 day per month, whereas in Hong Kong it's 1 day per week. Now, I see this abuse happening often, even in my own village, right? Where the law says it should be 24 continuous hours count as a rest day. But like you said, I often will see through windows helpers who are cleaning well to 10 a.m., that type of thing, and then, you know, walking towards a bus stop nearing midday, and then I see them returning close to 6 p.m., this type of thing. So it's, I see these infringement, this abuse happening on a regular level, and it is one of those things that makes me think, you know, that's not the reading of the law, but as you have pointed out, many people will find loopholes to this. So it is something I see, and it is something I'm aware of. I'm sure you have read the news recently about the tents in the bus stations, and from 2 weeks last week.
Where we live.
Yes. So the question was asked, you know, why here? Why in a noisy bus terminus? Is that where you're going to set and pitch a tent? And the answer was so honest that many of the helpers who contributed to that story said, if we go anywhere else, we're kicked out, we're not wanted, we're not allowed. Even if it's a public park, we're told you can't be here. So this is one of the only spaces where we can be. So, I mean, it's constant that they're faced with these types of things.
And like, I think it's really surprising that the fact that they have like nowhere to go, and even when they have like somewhere to go in the bus stop, like around the bus stop area, that's like the only place they can go to, and yet people still find a way to complain about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to like understand is like these helpers, although like they come here as like to work and like care for a lot of our families, it's still important to consider the fact that they're like workers and not machines, right? Like they still deserve their time with their family, they still deserve their rest time and downtime. And I think that what happens is that a lot of these Hong Kong employers who live here kind of neglect that because they see these helpers as people below them. Mm-hmm. Well, at the end of the day, they're not below you, they're just coming to help you, and you should be more grateful for that, I think.
Yeah, and the fact how in like some places or most places in Hong Kong, they're not allowed to stay there, which is kind of like dehumanizing those helpers, as in like they're nothing more than a helper to clean the house and do work for them. But once they're in their own comfort zone, then they can't do anything. They have nowhere to go, and they simply have to find like the bus terminals to sleep in, which is not even like a safe environment for them.
I find it interesting, the helper that you interviewed in this case, she made the analogy or the metaphor that she feels like a ghost in the home where she's supposed to stay, right? Nobody wants a ghost, right? Yeah. You don't want to live in a place that's haunted, right? Yeah. And the fact that you have invited someone into your home and made them feel that way, as if they are an unwanted presence, when really they are in fact the backbone that makes your house possible, your household run. I can speak for my own family, okay? My husband and I live in Hong Kong. We've lived here for 11 years now. We have no other family in Hong Kong, none. No, the closest family member that we have is a 12-hour flight away in the UK. So if we did not have our helper, her name is Lorna, we wouldn't be able to work, we wouldn't be able to live in Hong Kong, we wouldn't be able to have our family that we have. And so we rely on her so much. And the thing is why would we ever want to put her in a position where she feels sick or tired or unwelcome? She's in charge of our son for so many more hours a day than we are. Why would we ever want to make that person sick and tired and hungry and irritable because we've treated them like a ghost in our own house? So I think that's the thing that's most interesting to me, is why people don't have that connection. Why would you want that person to feel uncomfortable or unhappy in your home when you have entrusted them with all of the things that are most important to you, your children, your food, your parents, the elderly, these types of things. So that kind of cognitive dissonance, I think, dissonance is a very interesting concept.
I feel like more of like a little branching effect of that consequence, because there's so many like within the Hong Kong community, there are a lot of questions like you said before, like, oh, since like she went there, she already went to the Philippines previously, should she go again, or should we pay them for it? Help them pay for it. I think that kind of like reflects a little bit on what the helpers view themselves as. Because I previously had a helper that she was really sick, and she had the influenza virus during winter time. But then she didn't tell, it wasn't like she was intentionally trying to like infect us with it. She wasn't trying to kind of get us sick. But then once my mom told her like, oh, I think your condition really isn't that great. I think you should stop and take a rest. And she was like saying, oh, I was scared to ask you for help because I thought that it was going to be a bit awkward to ask you for medical help, or if I could go to a doctor because I'm scared of neglecting my duties. I'm scared of you like viewing me as a bit weaker than that. So, and I can say that I've had 5 helpers in the past. Not one of them has ever asked my mom for sick leave, and I think that's a branching effect that does happen because of that. So yeah.
Yeah, I think same for me. None of my helpers have ever like told us verbally that I'm sick. Instead, they just endure the pain in silence. And I feel like they also have a sense that we would judge them, like what you said, we think them lower as what they are. So I feel like people should be more educated about this topic, because once again, domestic helpers are human at the end of the day. They get sick, they need sick leave too. So we should start caring more about them and educating people.
I mean, maybe that's a point as well. If my first point was we need to educate employers, but maybe we also need more help in educating the employees, right? The helpers themselves about these are your rights, You are not permitted to be fired over taking sick leave or, your annual leave or any of these things, your remuneration for long-term service. So maybe, as you said, you guys are making, this project is about advocacy and awareness, but perhaps on both ends of the spectrum, both for the employee stance, the wider public, and also the employee and employer side of that spectrum. I wonder in that case then, so from all of your research and all the conversations that you've had, what are you more likely to do in your own life, okay? Seeing the helper who lives with you, who is in charge of your family, what action do you think you'll be prompted to do from here on out?
For us, I think our family, we've tried to give the best experience for helpers, because the key point and how they're not allowed to have a key, that actually happened to one of my previous workers, and when she came to our home, she told us that, and our response is more to try to make her as comfortable as possible in our home, to try to get rid of all the previous experience that she had with and replacing them with our experience. So if I was a mother, or if I was an employer who had to hire a helper, I would say the first thing I would do is establish our boundaries very clearly. Obviously, I wouldn't say oh, you can do whatever you want, but I would say if you need any help, if you need any assistance, you're more than welcome to talk to me about it. I don't want you hiding anything from me in fear of whatever societal normalization that's happened with your previous employers. So yeah, that's what I would do.
For me, if I grow up and I have a domestic helper, then I would definitely firstly tell them that this is your space, and obviously safe privacy is the most important thing. So I would want to give her comfort and her privacy that she needs around the house.
Yeah, I think for right now, because this action we're taking right now, when I'm a mother 20, 30 years later, so right now I'd be more
That's kind of old.
I'd be more open-minded to her, maybe constantly remind her, give her hints we're not what you think we are. We're more open-minded. We're here to talk about your problems and even solve them. And in the future, yes, I would not only set my own boundaries, but hers also, as in this is her space, I can't invade it. When she's talking with her family, she has the rights to, and I can't say no to that.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.